In 2016, a new TV show hit the digital airwaves and needed a podcast dedicated to chronicling its adventures. An elite team has been assembled for this task. Unfortunately, the world's listeners have not heard of this wonder twin duo. And although they may not be known now, in the future they will be referred to as tomorrow's legends.
Welcome to 2046. I am the Flash.
And I'm Harley Quinn.
Harley, we're in the future.
How did we get here?
I have no idea, but how are we going to get back?
I don't know. I guess maybe I'll just come up with some time travel real quick here. I'll just make it up off the top of my head. Boom. Solve all our problems.
Now, why didn't we think of that before we got here, Miss Nuclear Physicist? You should have time travel under your belt already.
I know, I should. I'm a slacker, what can I say?
I think that Joker kind of distracts you from the important things.
It'd be funny if it weren't so pathetic.
Right, exactly. What's more important, time travel or the Joker?
Well, I don't know, looking at your past track record.
I know, the Joker's pretty important to me, I'm just saying.
All right, Harley, well, I guess while you're working on a way to get us back, we should probably just start talking to our listeners, because everybody's tuning in to this episode, which was episode 6, titled Star City 2046.
Yeah, we should probably give them something to listen to, more interesting than me crunching some numbers and looking through old textbooks. So.
And me tapping my fingers.
How long does this take? It's time, Flash.
Yeah, and I'm not good with waiting. I'm a little bit impatient. Everything must be done fast.
I know. I don't know what it is about you. Speedsters. Gosh.
Anyway, guys, thank you for joining us. We've got a few things we wanted to cover before we actually get to this episode, because things are constantly changing and things are happening and we're tweaking and fixing and coming up with new ideas. So right off the bat, there was something today that got brought to our attention that on iTunes, the podcast feed, I guess, had lost its album cover art and stuff. So we have now fixed that. You'll be able to have a nice little picture to go with that. Thank you, Carl, out there, for noticing that. And, hopefully it's fixed. And the other thing, Harley, that we wanted to let everyone know is that a lot of our listeners are coming from Aero Squad and Central City Underground, and they're being used to those podcasts that are attached to the Golden Spiral Media website. We just wanted to remind everybody that we actually aren't. We are not affiliated with GSM or any other hosting site. We're doing this solo on our own time, out of our own pockets, and that is why we so much appreciate everybody's support for coming on board with us then, and especially the feedback and everything that you guys give to us. It's because we're doing this as a hobby, because we like to, and it's fun for us. It's just amazing that there's been the kind of support already. So thank you for that. Yeah,
it's been really great. And, we'll extend our thanks to the Golden Spiral Media community for, kind of coming over and supporting us, even though we're not officially affiliated.
Exactly. That's it, because it is still kind of a family. I mean, that's where we started. We both started in as feedback caller inners, I guess.
Contributors.
Contributors. That's a much better word. So that's where we started. And yeah, it's, we definitely owe it to family over there. Even farther back in the day, like at Aero Squad, I've been with them since the beginning when I started on TV Talk. And since TV Talk is no longer there and GSM took over some of those shows. So yeah, it's definitely, we owe a lot to them. And while we're on that note, I do want to point out or give a shout out once again to the Shadow, Brian, and podcast overlord Kevin at Aero Squad, because they talked about us this week on their Aero Squad podcast and gave us a little shout out and asking people to come join us. So we wanted to say thanks.
Thank you.
Yet again. And then also remind people, if you watch Aero and you haven't heard of the Aero Squad podcast, then definitely look them up. They are at aerosquad.com. You can find everything there.
Absolutely. It's a great podcast. It's a great community. That's where we came from. So if you like us, you'll love them.
Just don't love them too much because, we want to keep you with us.
Yes. And they are, I feel like we should probably mention this since we've sort of stolen it, but they are the originators of the superhero name. So I just wanted to mention that.
That's true. Giving everybody names, yes.
Yeah, it's how I got mine.
Another little tidbit we wanted to talk about, since we're on this kind of topic of where we came from and stuff, we thought it would be fun to share with our listeners and this community that we are starting to build. Not everybody knows about our origin story, Harley.
This is true. It is an interesting story.
Yeah, I mean, we both were contributors calling into Aero Squad, so we knew of each other.
We did.
But we had never met. We don't live anywhere near each other. And
Nope.
then the Aero Squad just came up with an idea to have a big meetup in Atlanta, Georgia, United States, for the Dragon Con. And they wanted everybody that possibly could make it from Aero Squad to go down there so we could have a big meetup in person and hang out and have a good time.
Mm-hmm.
So I hopped on a plane from where I am all the way up in Calgary, Canada, and flew down there, and it was at that Dragon Con event that I ran into Harley here. I got to meet her for the first time, and
I know. I mean, I think it was dinner on Thursday night. You got in really late.
I was the last to show, yeah.
Yeah, you had a crazy travel day.
Yeah.
But yeah, because I was sitting down chatting with Brian, and he's like, Martin's on his way, and I was like, yeah, that would be so cool to meet Martin. And then there you are, you showed up. You're like, hey.
Hey.
It was like, I think you two know each other. It was like, really?
See, that's how fast the flash is. You're like, hey, it'd be neat to meet Martin, and poof, there I was, just like that.
Right in front of me. It's amazing.
So that's where it started. We met in Atlanta, Dragon Con in 2015, and we pretty much spent the weekend together.
Yeah.
Hanging out all day long throughout the show and going to different panels, and yeah, we really got along. And then Brian and Emily invited us to guest host with them live for a live podcast. I don't know how many of you heard that, but
That was fun.
that was so much fun. We were just out in a hotel lobby, the four of us sitting down, and just started talking. And there was one point, I'm not sure if any of you heard it, but there was one point where Brian and Emily were doing some research on their phones, so they kind of handed the mic to us, and me and Jess here kind of talked for, I'd say 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, we took it over. Oh, we were speculating about the Arrow trailer because we had just seen it.
For the new season.
Mm-hmm. And we were replaying it. It was like a play-by-play.
Yeah.
Because we had literally just seen it. So. Yeah.
And then it was at that moment we realized how much fun it was, and we stayed in touch after the show.
Mm-hmm.
After being there, I came back home and we stayed in touch, and we got online together on Skype and just started talking about Arrow and Flash and all that. And we decided, hey, wouldn't it be fun to just record ourselves and try to do a fun thing? And
Here we are.
Here we are. You know, we hashed out a couple episodes of what we originally started off as the Wonder Twins podcast, and then this developed into Tomorrow's Legends. Here we are. So that's the origin story. And then the really neat thing, the other point I wanted to make, when I first started listening to Aero Squad 4 years ago on TV Talk, I didn't understand podcasting. I didn't know how it worked. I didn't get the whole setup of the audio recording and all that kind of stuff. When I was listening to Brian and Kevin, I thought they were in the same room, sitting at the same computer and the same microphone and working together. I had no idea you could do these things separate.
Mm-hmm.
And so going from that to where we are now, Harley is in Atlanta, Georgia. I am in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We looked it up to get the stats. We are 3,700 kilometers apart. It's a 6-hour flight or a 34-hour drive. And yet here we are getting to talk to each other and creating a podcast together. So that's pretty cool.
It's amazing what technology can do.
And then one last little bit of news. Harley, why don't you tell them about how the other shows are going offline for a little while, and we're not.
Yeah, so, and I actually didn't realize this was happening until people started posting about it, but apparently Flash and Arrow are going on hiatus for about a month, so we are not, though. Legends is going to be on. We've got 4 episodes all through the month of March, and I think it looks to have a 1 to 2 week break probably at the start of April.
Right.
So maybe we could do like a fun episode or something, or a feedback episode. So, you know, send us some feedback, you know, one while we're on hiatus, but definitely while Flash and Arrow are off, you've still got us. So come on over and send us all your thoughts and crazy theories, and we'll just keep going with it.
And the way we worded it, we really want lots of feedback, because you guys got nothing to do if you're missing out on your shows. Come inundate us, overwhelm us with feedback, because that'll be fun for us.
That'd be a lot of fun. I mean, if, we get a good response, maybe we could do a fun feedback only episode and we can do our regular show episode.
Yeah, for sure.
Depending on how many people we lure to send us stuff. That sounded kind of weird, but you know what I mean.
Well, I mean, come on, Harley. You and Joker, you've been known to have your little white windowless van driving around the neighborhood luring,
My plan is
offering free candy or something like that.
I'm not a pedophile. Come on.
Well, maybe some adults want some candy. I don't know.
Hey, look, I've got a cute puppy.
Yeah, see? All right, so and one little tidbit more that we wanted to share with you. We have a new idea for the Facebook page. Hopefully you guys have all found it. It's called Tomorrow's Legends. It's a group page on Facebook. And if you haven't, then look us up and come find us and send a request to join, and we will, of course, accept you. But we have an idea, because we know there is a lot of people out there, a lot of fans that watch the shows, and they maybe listen to the podcast, but they're too shy to send in a voicemail, or too shy to send in an email, or maybe don't have the time or whatever, so they don't bother. But they are on the various Facebook group pages, the Aero Squad page, the Central City page, or whatever else, and they're in there posting like crazy, but we never ever hear from them in any of the podcast feedbacks. So for those people especially, and then for, of course, everybody else, we want to start something that's solely going to be on the Facebook page, and we are going to call it Harley's Couch Sessions.
I'm going to get into your heads.
She's going to get into your heads, because, Harley, her background is psychiatry. So, why don't you explain what that's going to be, Harley?
Yeah, this is true. I just want to know everybody's secrets, and no, I'm just kidding. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to come up with a specific question each week and ask you all to provide some feedback on the Facebook group. And it's going to be something fun, something like how we've kind of started with your theories on Gideon. So maybe that'll be our first one, and we can kind of post that out there. But we're going to just do different fun questions. It'll probably be more along the lines of maybe either a minor plot point or some sort of theory, not necessarily something that's going to be answered within the next episode. I guess it could be, but we're looking for more of some of the obscure things, just to kind of get some conversation started, see what everybody's thinking, get some fun theories going, because everybody loves to speculate. So
yeah, and it's going to be something very specific, because we're still going to have the regular episode discussion threads going on there, but this is something that we're going to pull one idea out of all of that discussion and have a separate post just for that. So all the feedback generated for that should just be focused on that one specific question that probably is going to come up.
Yeah, and it'll be its own separate post. We'll title it Harley's Couch Sessions and just start numbering the questions so that we can kind of keep them all straight and get some fun discussion out there. So.
Yeah, so come on in, kick off your shoes, throw your head back,
and tell me all of your secrets.
And open wide up to Harley, because she's going to ask you. Now, going into feedback we got a little bit of feedback for last week, and so the way we explained it to you, we're going to, at the start of our show, we'll do any feedback that we got for the previous week, and we'll save for this current week feedback for the end of the show. So last week we had, or I should say feedback for last week, we had a little bit. But first, there's some iTunes reviews we really wanted to give a shout out to.
Yeah, we got 3 reviews this week already, which is awesome. There are 3 5-star reviews, which we're very excited about.
Fantastic.
And they are from 3 of our good friends. We've got Full Quiver, who is, should I say his actual name? Or should I just stick with the aliases?
If you want alias, I guess, sure.
Yeah, so we've got one from Full Quiver, one from the Huntress Diana, and then one from Jeremy, our Aussie friend, who does not yet have a superhero name.
No.
So we're going to have to work on him. We're going to have to work on him.
We'll have to help him with that, yeah.
Yeah, but so I'll just run quickly through the reviews. They were all pretty short, but they had some nice things to say, so we wanted to give them a shout out. So the first one from Full Quiver was, "Good job, Wonder Twins. I just binge listened," is that a thing? "To the first 5 episodes. I really enjoyed their observations on this fun show. Good job, Flash and Harley."
Short and sweet, and thank you so much.
And binge listening is totally a thing. I do it all the time.
Yeah, it totally is a thing. Sometimes you get behind and, we're busy. So, yeah, when you listen to 3 or 4 episodes in a row, it's kind of like how I do TV sometimes. I'll get a couple weeks behind, so watching 3 episodes in a row makes it more like a movie, and you really get to dive in. So, hey, thanks for the dedication, Full Quiver, and, listening to our voices for that long. I kind of almost feel sorry for you.
I know, there's a couple people that are like, "I just listened to all 5 episodes," and I'm like, "Oh no, I'm so sorry."
If we get into your dreams at night, we apologize.
Oh no. Oh, I certainly hope not, these poor people.
All right, what's the next one?
The next one is from the Huntress Diana. "Loose and fun, just how I like my podcasts. Flash Martin and Harley Jess have great chemistry and keep things light and fun. I've had my fill of those other podcasts that are overly stuffy and follow a formula. I'm all in for keeping things fun. Great job on your first 5 episodes." Thanks.
Well, thanks so much, Huntress.
Yeah.
Again, some kind words. It's just really nice to hear.
Good to know that our unorganization, that's not a word, our lack of organization is appreciated.
This coming from the psychiatrist, unorganization.
Hey.
And one more. We got one more from our friend Jeremy all the way down in Australia.
Yes, and we are the definitive podcast for Legends of Tomorrow.
Whoa.
I know, it sounds really exciting. So what do you want out of a TV show related podcast? Enthusiastic hosts that don't talk over each other. One male, one female? Check. Informed content without sounding elitist? Check. Welcoming feedback from listeners? Check. And the podcast is young enough to encourage and welcome your input. Simply put, there is no better podcast to accompany this TV show. I couldn't have put it better myself, Jeremy. Really.
Jeez, if we need a sales pitch person, that's our guy right there.
I know. Yeah, anytime we need promotion, Jeremy, we're going to call you up.
Definitely. But again, wow. Thanks for those reviews, guys, that were really quite touched by your kind words.
Yeah, that was great. And if you haven't left us a review, head on over to iTunes, search for Tomorrow's Legends, leave us a 5-star rating, or I guess whatever rating you feel we deserve, and type in some awesome comments about us. But if you have some constructive criticism, I suppose we would take that too.
Did you see what she did there? That was some subliminal messaging there. Just telling you to leave 5 stars and you're going to be just...
That's what we need. 5-star reviews. Let's make it happen. Let's get us up to the top of iTunes.
So now, something very, very special. We had a voicemail come in from someone near and dear to us who has kind of been a mentor to us, helping us out huge behind the scenes. It was just very, very cool to hear from Kevin, the podcast overlord. It's kind of like a role reversal. Normally we're calling into him and he's playing our messages in Air Squad, and now it's going the other way around, and it's awesome. So we're going to play that now, Harley.
Hello, Wonder Twins. Podcast Overlord here. Wanted to give you some quick feedback. Not going to get a chance to watch this week's episode and get your feedback in time, but now that I'm listening to the podcast, congrats on getting yourself set up with a full podcast site and an iTunes and everything else that goes along with it. So I enjoyed your thoughts on the show, and looking forward to, getting some feedback in. I'll take some time here and there and send you, the typical Martin 10-minute message from time to time. But this one I'll keep fairly brief, so you can actually use it on the podcast if you want. But appreciate you guys putting the time into it. Legends is a show I'm enjoying quite a great deal. And this might sound a little funny, but it actually makes sense to me. I watch the show very much like a comic book. Not that our other shows like Arrow and Flash and everything else aren't, but meaning that when I go to watch this one, I'm not thinking too deep on it. It's no disrespect to the show, but to me it's very much fun eye candy. There's a lot of characters I greatly enjoy. They're throwing them up on the screen with some crazy stuff going on. You just sit back and grin, popcorn entertainment, as I call it for a lot of my shows. You just enjoy it, and then shortly after, I don't give it a lot of thought. But that doesn't mean it's not a lot of fun. I don't look forward to it. I also like the fact they're finding ways with so many lead characters to, put different ones out front in each episode, so we don't lose track of what's going on. Because if you try to have that many key characters on the screen all the time, it turns into nothing but one-liners. Not that isn't fun here and there, but you can't have an entire show. It's nothing but little quips and so forth. You got to give characters a chance to develop. So again, thanks for what you're doing, gang. Looking forward to the podcasts, and I hope you all take care.
And that is our Overlord.
Thanks, Kevin. That was awesome.
Thank you so much. Yeah, it was just so cool to get a voicemail to our podcast show from the guy that we have been talking to for 4 years now, sending in our feedback. It was just really, really neat, and so appreciative of your support. Podcast Overlord, you definitely are our mentor. All right, Harley, let's get to this episode, Star City 2046. I found this episode kind of to be the first standalone episode. It doesn't really connect with the main story arc other than continuing from where last week's show left off with the Green Arrow surprise, but it's the first episode that ended without the hint of where they're going next, where and when they're going next, and it was kind of like an encapsulated show all by itself. They just dealt with that year, 2046. It was a Green Arrow story, in, done, and out.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I did. I noticed that, and I almost want to say it wasn't really a filler episode to me. Like, it doesn't feel like a filler episode, but that is kind of what it was because it was very self-contained. So
Right.
what do they call those? Maybe it's like, I think it's called a bottle episode. So
Okay.
It's where they're all in, you're in one different space, and it doesn't necessarily connect back to the main overarching storyline. It can kind of almost go anywhere in the series.
In the same sense that the very first Flash and Arrow crossover, when it was Flash versus Arrow, and they had that 2-part episode was a self-contained episode too. It didn't really have anything to do with the rest of the story arcs in the show. So yeah, that's where I kind of felt. But it doesn't. I'm not taking away from it. It was still a decent episode. That's just the feeling I had.
Yeah, no, it was a great episode. I actually thoroughly enjoyed it. I was sucked into it the whole time. It was great.
Well, it's because of where I had to start from. We had to, who's the Green Arrow? What's the mystery behind all of that? It had you sucked in right from the get-go because you wanted to know the answers to all of that.
Yeah, and they kept hooking you. There's always something different. It's like after each commercial break, I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? I need to know. So it was really well done. I really enjoyed it.
Well, and because I agree with you, I'm gonna get my one big nitpick out of the way right now.
Okay.
And I have to, because now they've done this for a couple times, so I need to ask, why do they keep landing the Wave Rider in plain sight? And only after they've walked quite a ways away from it do they decide to, hey, why don't we put the ship in camo mode? He calls on his watch, hey Gideon, go into camouflage mode. We don't want anybody to, anybody to see you. It's like, well, it's probably taken you 15, 20 minutes in real time to get to where you are. We've seen the ship fly in camouflage mode anyway. Why don't they camouflage as they're coming in, find a landing spot, land, get out of the ship, and it's fine. And there's no chance of it ever being seen.
Yeah, I don't know. The only thing I can think of is that it makes a cool visual statement, but practicality, not so much.
Yeah. So there you go. That's my nitpick. It's just like
I think it's a valid nitpick.
Land the spaceship on top of a building in the middle of the city. 20 minutes later, oh hey, let's go to camo. Somebody would have had to have seen it by then. So yeah.
Yeah, I kind of was thinking the same thing. I'm like, what? Okay.
Yeah.
They just didn't notice that giant spaceship just laying in the middle of the city. All right, we'll go with it.
Now, last week we talked a little bit about where it is they exactly are when they go to time travel, and I called it a time tunnel, and you disagreed with that. You kind of more explained it as a limbo thing, so we did find out a little bit about that, didn't we?
Yeah, they sort of confirmed it in the previews, and maybe they had mentioned it on the show, and I just hadn't remembered, but they called it the temporal zone. Mm-hmm. And so that's the place they go when they're essentially outside of time. So that they're in this temporal zone, and then they kind of, pick what the next time period is that they're trying to go.
Right.
So that's kind of how I took it, and a little bit less of a time tunnel thing per se, just as more of a, like a time zone, temporal zone.
Right.
Is kind of how they explain it.
And I actually went back and just rewatched the first episode because I'm getting my girlfriend into it. She's listening to our podcast, and I'm telling her, I'm like, you can't listen to the podcast if you don't know the show. You've got to watch it.
She can, but
I mean, she can. Well, she's doing it to support me and support us. And so, I mean, that's really cool of her, but it's also funny. So we started watching it, and they did say right in the very beginning, Rip does explain that it is limbo, and it is not in time in any sense of the word. So
that's what I thought, because I knew they were outside of time, and I called it limbo, but I didn't know if that was just the best way I could think of to describe it.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that they kind of gave it a little bit more of a formal name. If not in the last episode, at least they dubbed over it in the preview, so we have something to call it by. Anyway, just to kind of jump into the episode, I loved the way that it started. It was just very action-packed very quickly. Everyone was very confused. No one knew who this new Green Arrow was, and he was not playing very nicely.
No, he wasn't. And that was the big question mark everybody got so excited about. Who is he?
Mm-hmm.
And what I liked is they didn't leave us hanging very long. We got answers to those questions pretty quick. They didn't drag it out at all.
We did, yeah.
And there you go. Just like we said on last week's show, Legends only mystery did not last very long. That was the only.
Yeah, exactly.
So, once again, we're without mystery.
Yeah.
So.
Well, technically the mystery is where are we going to end up next week, because we don't really know.
Yeah, and then what's going to happen within the opening seconds of the show? That mystery will be solved.
Yeah. Well, I know.
So they're true. But anyway, okay. So who is this Arrow? Who did we end up finding out who he is?
He is John Diggle Jr.
Pretty cool. A lot of people guessed that. That was a running theory.
Did. Yeah.
But it's still pretty cool.
Yeah. And so, okay. So I have a question.
Okay.
Because he's going by Connor Hawk, and everybody kept saying that Connor Hawk is Oliver's son.
Mm-hmm.
So is that the thing from the comics? Is Connor Hawk Oliver's son in the comics, or would they?
As far as I know, I wasn't a big Green Arrow reader, but as far as I know from all the comic book lore, Connor Hawk is Oliver's son. So maybe someone could verify that for us, just so that we're not talking out our butts here and don't know what we're talking about. We could do a quick Google search too and let you know. But yeah, assuming that he is, I thought that was quite a major change of the comic book lore, that he's using the name Connor Hawk. So it made me wonder, does that toss out the idea of Oliver Queen having a son named Connor?
I think so. And I just looked it up real quick. Connor Hawk is the son of Oliver Queen and Sandra Hawk from the comics. And so that is quite a departure that they've made it Diggle's son instead of Oliver's son. But that is consistent with Arrow, because in Arrow, they've introduced his son as William. Mm-hmm. And by Samantha, Samantha is the mother's name, not Sandra. And I don't recall the last name. I'd have to look that up too. But
right. They have changed it a little bit. So the question that I was asking in our notes here is that maybe Oliver did have a son and his name was Connor Hawk, but something happened to him for some reason, and John Jr. is just honoring that and by going by the name Connor Hawk. Kind of like how Laurel took on Black Canary to honor her sister who was the Black Canary. Maybe that's a side story. Maybe something did happen to the actual Connor Hawk.
Maybe, yeah. I don't know. I just it seemed like it was more of a shout out from the writers to kind of have a shout out or tie into the comics, but they wanted to do something a little different and make it John's son. Or again, this is a potential future. So this could have been a, what if scenario.
That's exactly what I was going to say, that it could be a very simple answer that this is a possible future. It may not happen. They just wrote that in there for fun to mess with everybody, and really it's not ever going to happen that way.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I think.
Yeah, like you said, one of the what-if scenarios. And it was fun anyway.
It was good.
Mm-hmm. So, something else we noticed, there was no Vandal Savage and no Kronos this episode.
No, there wasn't.
Like, not at all. Not even barely a mention of them, even.
Yeah, which is why it got me thinking that it was kind of a bottle episode. It was kind of self-contained, and it could have been inserted anywhere in the series.
Yeah, I'm actually okay. I was actually kind of happy for that. I think I've had enough of Kronos right now, just always coming in, and without giving us any real backstory on Kronos, it's a little bit annoying that he just shows up, takes a few pot shots at them, and then loses them again.
Yeah.
So it's nice to not have him around, and the same with Vandal Savage, like we talked last week. As long as we know he's the arcing main storyline, he's always lingering in the background, so we don't need to see him every single time. And he wouldn't have really fit in this episode anyway, because they didn't. It's not like they went to a time period they knew he was going to be in. They crash landed in this time period, and the story of the episode was them just fixing the ship and getting out of there. So it was not along the Savage storyline anyway. So we didn't.
No. Yeah, no, it wasn't at all. And I mean, I liked it because what they were able to do with it being a potential feature and all of the different ramifications that came from that was extremely interesting and still well within the confines of the show. But yet we didn't have to have an episode that was central around fighting Vandal Savage or running from Kronos or both.
Right. What I did see in it, there was a lot of future story arcs for Arrow, possibly. Whether Arrow actually takes, because the shows are all kind of interconnected, so whether Arrow takes some of the elements they presented in this episode and weaves it into maybe they will have a couple flash forwards, or, season 8 of Arrow might show a couple things that we just saw. I don't know. It was just neat how they created a few possibilities.
Yeah, well, it certainly got a lot of people speculating, so.
Yeah, and I mean, I liked seeing this part of the future, I guess, Star City. It connected it back to where Legends began, them being in the future and seeing the older Oliver Queen, which we'll talk about. It just brought a nice full circle feeling to it that, because they're jumping all over history and the future, they're jumping back and forth. You kind of need to get grounded from that. You need to come back to your roots and re-ground yourself. And that's what this episode kind of did. Even though they were in the future, it's still... For my emotions and everything, it grounded me back to we're back to familiar territory. This is where we came from. It's just like, and that's why, so for them to walk around, especially Sara, walking around the city, like, holy cow, my home is destroyed. What's going on? That really connected it for me.
Yeah, and it gave them a lot more to play with, and I liked that.
Mm-hmm.
I thought a good way maybe we could tackle the rest of this is. They did jump around a bit, and we did have sort of some defined teams, so I thought we could kind of try and tackle it that way a little bit.
Sure.
So kind of the first, I guess, storyline is the one that's just about Snart and Rory.
A very interesting, yeah. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I'll let you start this one off, because it was definitely a different feel for those two this time around.
It was definitely a different feel. I mean, I like that they actually acknowledged this time that he brings two thieves along for a reason. Because
Rip does.
Exactly. Rip does, yes.
Yep.
He, sorry, forgot to mention, he was acknowledging, yes. But we've seen them steal things in the past, but it was more opportunistic or more like, oh, well, this is my specific skill set. You brought me along for a reason. So it was nice to see Rip actually say, and that he had that mindset. Oh, well, yeah, I actually did bring two thieves for a reason. So I liked that.
He acknowledged their skill set, and they're more than happy about that. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, everybody has their place on the team, and their place, they're in the spotlight at certain times, depending what the mission is.
Yeah, exactly. So we get to see an interesting side of Mr. Rory here. I mean, he clearly loves that this is a chaotic future where the criminals rule. We definitely see that. And he had this great quote. I thought it was great. He said, it's like World War III out there. It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Yeah, he was quite enamored by that.
Yeah. He really
I
was.
did think the World War III comment was maybe a bit over the top, because really it was just a bunch of gangs fighting in the streets. So I thought, really, it's not World War III. Like, it's not that bad. But the idea that it's just chaotic and he loves it, it was just hilarious. Just the way he said it. It was like poetry or something to his ears.
Yeah, I know. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
But what I found the most interesting, again, and this has been a theme throughout the series so far for Captain Cold, Mr. Snart seems to be the voice of reason.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
It's really funny. So I'm wondering why. What is his motive? Why does he states that he wants to stop Savage? So why does he want to stop Savage? I feel like there needs to be some sort of ulterior motive. I don't know.
No, I get what you're saying. I wonder if it's just a matter of, if you think of who Captain Cold is and Heatwave is, they just want to keep robbing and pillaging and making money. So if maybe it's an angle like if Savage destroys the world and takes over, there's nothing left for them to do, nothing left for them to rob or get rich from because everything's destroyed.
That's true.
Maybe he's just stealing their fun.
He's just stealing their fun. I like that. Okay. Yeah, because I was like, I don't have a good reason for why he's the voice of reason and why he's trying to stop Savage, but keep Rory in line. It's interesting.
Well, that could be one of your couch sessions, possibly.
Oh, I should probably write that down.
Or, if people want to give us feedback, regular feedback about that, it's a really interesting point, because Captain Cold is displaying quite opposite behavior of what we thought he would be like. And then, the way he was, when he was arguing with Heatwave, he called the team their friend. We need to, wait for our friends or save our friends. And he feels that camaraderie with them already. And I think part of it was like when the disagreement started to happen between the two of them is because as much as Rory liked the chaos and felt like he fit right in, because really it's hard for him to lose the desire to just burn the world and destroy things himself. So I think that was the draw for him. He could really fit in. Captain Cold doesn't see any potential there. It's a wasteland. There's nothing for them to gain from that place. It's just a thug's life, basically. And I think Captain Cold is above that, is beyond that, and ultimately he wants better for himself and Rory. He wants a better life, and by continually robbing and stealing things and essentially getting rich and continuing to have fun. I don't think he got a feeling that they could get that. They could attain that from this place of time.
Yeah, no, they definitely couldn't. It was a wasteland, and I guess, we see from this quote from Rory, he's like, he just wants to see the world burn. It's, it's that same quote again that I absolutely love, but it really speaks to the differences in their personality. So he's just in it for the mayhem, the destruction, to see it all burn. But Captain Cold's in it for the opportunity, the possibility. So he doesn't want a wasteland or complete destruction. I can totally see that. That makes sense. Yeah.
And this is where I kind of lost. Rory was a little bit lost on me this episode. I was starting to like him, and then this episode pulled him back to who he really is, which is very understandable, and I get it, the way I just described, that this suits his... Because of what's happened to him in the past, he has this chaotic desire, or desire for chaos, and so he got pulled back into that by being surrounded by it. So I didn't like him as much this episode. Even though it suited who he was, I kind of want to see, hopefully, some flashbacks to his past to understand why he is the type of person he is now. I would love for them to do that, to see that. So. Yeah,
I think that would be interesting. There's a reason he has an obsession with fire.
Yeah, well, you see he's completely scarred by it. So.
Yeah, you see all the burns. So yeah, I'd like to see more of his backstory.
Yeah, because I'm still hanging on to the way he's been the last couple episodes, where we saw a glimmer of something in him to like. It just got swallowed up by this episode and chaos that was around him. But it was like someone trying to get off of, a substance, and then you give it to them like candy. It's going to be near impossible for them to refuse if they're not fully off of it yet. And that's kind of how I felt with this.
Well, this is his ideal future, and he just set foot into it. Of course he doesn't want to leave.
Yeah, exactly. And then we come to Sara, Rip, and the Green Arrows. Plural, Green Arrows.
Yes. I originally, it was just the Green Arrow, and then we don't have to go much further before suddenly there's two. So.
The original.
I know. Oh, that was a cool reveal. Even though I knew it was coming, it was still really neat to see that.
It was so cool, and I think we mentioned somewhere here the music that they played when we saw Oliver come out of the shadows.
Yes.
It really tugged at my heart. It's almost like I felt the 30 years that have passed, and we haven't seen Oliver for 30 years. Then he walks up from behind the shadows, and there he is, much older and grizzled, and I actually sunk into that, like, oh my God, it's been 30 years. And it was so good to see him alive and okay, and they really did it really well. It's a fantastic moment.
It was great, and I like, we're probably going to jump around with these scenes a little bit, but okay. I like how when you come into the lair and you're looking around, and it's the lair we all know very well from Arrow, especially, if you're watching Arrow, and then you pan around and you see this bionic arm, and you're like, that's interesting, and then he steps out of the shadows, and he's missing an arm. I was like, well, that's fascinating, and that explains the bionic arm sitting randomly on the table.
But why isn't he wearing it? Like, what's going on there? Oh, that was my next question. I was like, ooh, bionic arm. Oh, Oliver has no arm. Okay, well, why isn't he wearing it? But...
Yeah. Well, he seemed like he had kind of, given up a little bit.
Yeah, he looked like pretty down in the dump, for sure.
Yeah, he looked pretty beat down. But some of the other interesting things, especially to go back and start. So Sara and Rip, they first encounter the new Green Arrow, who we find out is, Connor Hawke, aka John Diggle Jr. And, and so Sara kind of chases him down, and she figures out a little bit of what happened. So there's this thing called the Uprising. I guess it was 15 years ago relative to 2046. And so apparently...
it would have been 2031.
2031. Okay, thanks. Yes,
Uprising.
Thank you for doing that math. And Deathstroke brought an army with him. And then we see who Deathstroke is. And it was not the person I was expecting.
In my mind, I was like, oh my God, they got Manu Bennett, Slade Wilson. He's back for this. Awesome. What a secret surprise. And no.
Nope, wasn't him. I don't know why, especially 30 years later, I don't know why I was expecting to see him, running around the city doing what Deathstroke does. But I was not expecting him to have a son either.
No.
So that took me off guard, and I was like, well, that's interesting.
Well, and I was trying to figure out, when would he have had the son? Because looking at the
that's
kid,
true.
How old was he? I mean, did Slade get off of the Lian Yu Island prison that Oliver had him in and have a kid with someone? Or because that doesn't work. That would mean he'd only be like 14, roughly. So he must have had a kid before Oliver caught him and threw him on the island.
That's possible, but then how would he know that, I forget, was Slade openly Deathstroke? Did everybody know Slade Wilson was Deathstroke?
I think eventually, yeah.
Eventually they did?
Yeah, because I know in the comics and even the cartoon, he's constantly walking around with his mask off, and I think everybody does know who they are, who he is.
Okay, yeah. That's what I wanted to check, because I'm like, if he had a son before he was put into prison, and then the son kind of carried on the name, he would have somehow needed to know who he was. So how would he do that if that identity was secret? But if it was not secret, then that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what doesn't make sense is he still probably would have been fairly young. Cause in 2046, he's what? In his early to mid-20s, if even that.
It looked, yeah, I would have placed him 25 to 30 is what I was guessing he was. 25-ish, yeah.
He looked younger than me, so I was saying mid-20s, early 20s. So 2046, if he's, let's say, 25, then that would have been 2021.
Yep. So that means Deathstroke got out of prison. Because,
yeah.
I mean, essentially he got put in prison 2013, 2014, right?
Yeah.
So he got out of prison 2020, whatever, any time after, between 2013 and 2021, he could have gotten out of prison and had a
That's
kid.
true.
So I guess really it does all come together and actually make sense.
Yeah.
It jives.
It does, and again, it's a possible future.
Possible future.
So something could or could not happen in Arrow in the next 2 seasons.
Exactly, and I would love to have Slade come back because I love Manu Bennett. He's one of my favorites.
He's great.
But they did cast the kid very well. You looked at him and he definitely looks like Slade's son.
Yeah, it was very well done. The mannerisms were good too. He had nailed Deathstroke pretty dead on. I've of course got some more quotes in here.
You got some quotes? Okay.
Yeah.
Sure, let's go with quotes then. What were you looking at?
This one was, how can you save a city that doesn't want to be saved? It was just a great quote from the episode, because I like to put down my reactions, and I love quotes, so I like to write down the really cool quotes and kind of comment on them, and
right.
That's, kind of what I like to do, but...
And just on that quote, I mean, it's deep and a tragic thing to say. When you actually think about it, how can you save a city that doesn't want to be saved? It's like Star City is destined to always be in ruin.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me kind of rivals Gotham for being kind of the darkest, hardest city to be living in. Because Gotham is always dark and
yes, and
full of misery. And right now, Star City is rivaling that big time.
It is, and there were a lot of tie-ins to Batman in this episode, in my opinion.
Right. And then they actually said, when we were talking or listening to John Diggle Jr., he just quickly, as he's telling people or telling Sara his story, he says his dad's dead. Everyone's dead. Mm-hmm. So, okay, we're in the future. Oliver's the only one left. Does that mean Diggle's gone? I don't remember if they mentioned Felicity or whatever, but it just...
They did, yeah.
Did they?
Well, they
Okay.
mentioned that Felicity is gone. Oliver says Felicity's left after everything happened.
So that means she could possibly be alive then.
Yeah, I took that to mean that she was definitely alive, but she left Star City once the uprising hit, presumably in 2031.
But Diggle's dead, and that was a little bit of a shock. Okay.
Diggle's dead, Lance is dead, a lot of people were dead.
Yeah, that's true. Well, I mean, look at the destruction of the city. Not everybody's going to survive that kind of...
And they don't specifically say Laurel's dead, but I think you're kind of supposed to assume.
Yeah. And then, like you said, are they, with these little drops of hints, being that it's a possible future, are these little hints, little giveaways for what's to come on Arrow, or is it just tossed to the side as, because it's a possible future, doesn't mean we have to deal with it on the other shows?
Exactly. I think it's their way of having fun and doing something with an episode that is a crossover without being a crossover. Mm-hmm. And they don't have to work it into the Arrow mythos.
Yeah.
Or stick to it. So they don't paint themselves into a corner, basically.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
And then you were saying here, like, this version of the future, it's not set in stone because they can still go back to 2016, where they belong, where they're from, and stop everything that we're seeing from happening.
Yeah, and I thought that was really interesting because they made a point to keep coming back to that, which is, again, the fact that it was a possible future, that they could go back and reclaim their place, their rightful place in 2016 as if they had never really gone, and still stop all of these terrible things from happening. So I found that very interesting that they did that. And then, I mean, it also, like I said, it gets them, they can play with the Arrow storyline without having to worry about introducing all of these things somehow into the Arrow show.
Right.
Because it may never happen.
Well, it creates hundreds of possible what-if episodes by going to the future, they could you could have a whole season of what if episodes, just for fun. Like, what if they go to 2089 and we see what's going on? Yeah, it's.
I know, and there is a scene in there. It was when Sara and Rip were going through the warehouse, and it reminded me of Fringe. The feel of the scene, the music in the episode. I was waiting for an observer to show up. If anybody has watched Fringe, you will get that reference.
Miss Ice, are you listening to us? You love Fringe.
She does love Fringe. Bonita loves Fringe. Yokoban, she'll understand what I'm talking about.
So after this little meeting, which I think had everyone's attention right off the bat and was answered everything we wanted to know, which I love. Then we kind of get into a little bit of Jax, Kendra, Ray, and Dr. Stein.
Yeah, so we've kind of got this side, almost comic relief, except it's not comic relief, back on the ship. And these are the 4 people that stayed on the Wave Rider and didn't go into Star City. Well, I guess they do at the very end, but for right now, they're just kind of off on the ship, running diagnostics, fixing things, doing their thing. And so, to me, it was kind of like more like a lighthearted thing. We've got such a heavy, dark episode going on when you're in Star City that you needed kind of something to almost lighten it up. So that's kind of what I took this episode to be. I mean, for lack of a better word, they're creating a love triangle. I mean, really? That's kind of crazy.
And that's a lighter version of my reaction. I actually did not like this part of the story at all. I mean, seriously, Carter, in the show's story, Carter is literally gone maybe days ago, a week or 2 at most in the show's story time. And already we've got 2 people fighting over Kendra.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're fighting over who has a chance with her. To me, I just found it ridiculous, disrespectful to Carter and to Kendra and to their relationship. I mean, we're gonna run into Carter again somewhere. I'm imagining.
That's
I just found it silly and disrespectful. That it just, even as Carter as one of your teammates, the guy's barely been gone a week. Died. It's not like he disappeared. He died, and you're already gonna hit on his 4,000 years. Seriously. So I was really glad that Kendra shot that down right away.
Yeah.
I just didn't think it was cool. I don't know why the writers thought this would be good to put in. Unless they're trying to tell us that months and months have gone by, then maybe that would be okay. But to me, it has not been very long at all since Carter died, and it was inappropriate for me.
Yeah, I just honestly think they needed something to lighten it up, and this is what they went with. I mean, you had some good moments with Jax and Dr. Stein, and you had Dr. Stein fishing for him. I mean, that was pretty funny.
Yeah,
he completely screws it up.
Oh yeah, they played it great.
Yeah,
they played it great. It was funny, and Stein is hilarious. Victor Garber is bang on with his comic timing and stuff and his facial expressions. So yeah, it was funny, for sure.
Yeah, so I just think it was their way of lightening it up. I didn't really have much else on the storyline, but it was contentious, so I felt like we should bring it up. A lot of people hated it. Yeah. I just took it for what it was. It just seemed like a way to kind of lighten up such a dark, heavy episode.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this then. Who do you think would be a better match for Kendra between Jax or Ray?
Oh, how old is Kendra? Because Jax is what, 20?
Yeah, he's barely out of high school. 19,
20.
Yeah.
Just from that perspective, I kind of lean towards Ray. I mean, they actually didn't have some bad chemistry. It wasn't too bad. I think with Jax, it's more of like a crush. He just thinks she's really pretty. She's pretty cool. I mean, she can fly around.
Exactly. He's got the hots for it. To me, it's like being in high school and having a crush on the popular girl that's 3 grades higher than you.
Exactly.
kind of thing. That's where I get it from. And so I don't think either of them suit her at all, but Rey probably would be the better of the two.
I agree. Yeah.
So moving on, because
yes.
that was just the good part. Let's come to Oliver and Sara, because this was, I thought, was really well done, this part of the episode.
Oh, it was. This was one of my favorite scenes. It was so good. And this is where it really kind of tied into Batman for me, because from The Dark Knight Rises, we have Bruce Wayne. He's a recluse. He's kind of locked up. He's injured his knee. And he's not really being Batman. He's not, saving his city. And his city is kind of falling into ruins a little bit. And so it just, the way that they had Oliver kind of written and played, I just had that feeling. It just felt very Bruce Wayne. I mean, I know a lot of people, especially early on, did describe Arrow as like Green Batman, and there's a lot of similarities. But to me, this was something in a good way. Like it felt like Batman in a good way. I don't know. I really liked it, and I liked that it had that feel because I love Batman. So
right.
It was great.
Well, it was one of the stronger story parts of the episode. The way they played it out, it was like, for that, however long it was, 6-7 minutes long, it was like we were watching an episode of Arrow.
Mm-hmm. It was.
It tugged at the old heartstrings a little bit for me. The way and this is what I said earlier when I said I actually felt the emotional strain of 30 years having passed. Because I looked at it from Oliver's perspective, and for him, it's been 30 years since he's seen any of these people. He's had to go through all these fights and this uprising and the battles. He's struggled through them without Sara and Rey there. Mm-hmm. And then for Sara to see that, to see how that's affected him, how that's weathered him and worn him out, to see what it's done to him, it was really hard for her to see his suffering over all those years, even though for her it's only been a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. I don't often highlight Katie Lotz's acting, but Kevin, this is for you. I thought she did a good job there because the two of them, they still had the chemistry from their work on Arrow together, and you felt that emotion that she realizes the suffering he's gone through, him not having seen her and his friends for 30 years, the relief on his face to see that they've come back. It was one of the best moments of the episode for sure.
It was very well done, and I loved the touch at the end when the Arrow theme music starts playing just at the end of the scene.
Mm-hmm, yeah, the very iconic,
loved
recognizable
that.
Arrow.
Yeah.
I mean, I even liked the few seconds that Oliver had in Rey, and just hey, good to see you again. I'm glad you're okay. Just that little, even that part was touching.
Yeah, I never got the feeling that him and Rey were particularly close.
No, not close, but buddies, because Rey has come to him for advice, and they both care deeply about Felicity. So I think there is a strong connection between them. I mean, well, you remember the scenes in the episodes in Arrow. Oliver was actually teaching Rey how to fight and how to protect himself better. So I think that's where they had a brotherly bond develop.
Yeah, that's right. I kind of forgot about that. Shall we kind of talk about the end a little bit here? I just had like a couple quick points that I wanted to touch on just from the ending scenes.
About how the episode was wrapping up?
Yeah. So, well, we witnessed this whole, basically almost like a fight or like standoff between Sara and Rip, where he's like, you can go back and try and save him, but I'm leaving you in an hour. Mm-hmm. And so she goes off, and we get that wonderful scene with her and Oliver, and then basically Rip's about to leave, and Stein's like, "What are you doing? You can't go." And then he makes this great point. He says, "What's the point of stopping Savage if we become as immoral as he is in the process?"
Yes.
And I think that's what finally gets to Rip. It's like, even though it's only a possible future, you still have to try. Like, these are still people, and what if you don't make it back to 2016? What if you don't get to change things? Yeah. You can't just let someone die.
And it comes back to they are a mixed up team, but they are a team, and it's that team that is jumping back and forth through time. They can't leave anybody behind, because then that person is stuck in that time period for the rest of their lives. You just can't do that. So it is immoral to do that. And Martin Stein's he's always the voice of wisdom and reason. He always thinks things through. He's already got, however old he is, he's got many years of experience and wisdom in there that they need to listen to him when they're. I still think Rip, a lot of times he reacts out of his need for revenge and to save his family.
Right.
So I think that's where a lot of his reactions, and you got to keep pulling him back until he settles down.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, as a time master, he views time differently than everybody else. It's much easier for him to step back and say, oh, this is a possible future, this isn't real.
Yeah.
Whereas Sarah's like, these are my friends, this is what happened to my city, I can't just leave it. So, I liked that.
And then we have a young Deathstroke and an old Arrow squaring off.
Yeah, well, first we get the young Deathstroke and the young Arrow squaring off, and that was pretty cool. And so it was like, it was almost the next generation.
The next generation of that battle, yeah.
Yeah, and then Oliver tags in. I was happy, yet it was interesting that he still had it. So I was like, I don't know how realistic that is, but
because I was guessing he's like 55 to 65, so he could still be in good shape. I think he's not going to be as strong or quick, but he should be experienced, that he fights better, he fights smarter.
That's true. So. And I guess we're supposed to assume he keeps up his training in his dark little dungeon. And
I forget who it was. Someone on the Facebook page had said they hope to see him do some salmon ladders.
Yeah.
Like, do you really want to see a 65-year-old? You think it was who?
I think it was Kelly.
Kelly, yeah. 65-year-old doing salmon ladders. Pretty funny. But they, you know what? They did such a fantastic job with his aging. I thought they made him definitely look more grizzled and weary. And
they did. It was great. They made
it. Now, the very last little bit here, I'm guessing this is your last quote.
It is. Every feature is worth fighting for.
Great line. So what do you like about that?
It's hopeful. It just kind of shows the point that even though the future's not necessarily set in stone, that doesn't necessarily mean you can just ignore what's happening and ignore these people that are in this possible outcome. So I just thought it was a good way to cap off the episode, given everything that the team went through.
Yeah, it puts a little perspective on everything, and this might not be your future, this might not be the actual future that's going to happen, but what if we can't, bringing it back to what you said, what if we can't get back, what if we can't go back and fix things, then this future is the future, and we have to fight for it. It is worth fighting for.
Yeah, exactly.
I threw in a little point here about, can we actually argue that line, though? Because you look at the future in 2166, Savage destroys the world and is now the dominating force. That future worth fighting for.
Well, I think the future worth fighting for is the future without him in it. So it's kind of a different way to look at it. It's still a future worth fighting for. It's just not that future that's worth fighting for.
Well, Harley, guess what time it is?
Is it time for feedback?
Twin powers, activate!
All right, Harley. So we actually got a little bit more feedback than we did last week, and it's so exciting, so much fun. We got a couple voicemails and a couple emails.
I know, that is very exciting.
And I guess because last week you were quite jealous of me introducing the voicemails, we agreed to switch. I will do the reading of the emails this time, and you get to introduce the voicemails.
Excellent.
But let me at least point out that we're just joking around with this. We're not saying that your emails are of any less value.
Of course not.
We love them equally. We're just messing around and having fun with each other.
Oh yeah, I'm just teasing the Flash. He probably reads faster than I do anyway. So
I read in I'm already done. What's taking you so long?
Oh, I didn't even hear it.
All right, so we're going to start off with an email. I will read this one out. This is from Kelly, aka Master Wordsmith. We always love getting responses from her. So, This is what she has to say this week. Wow, this is the quickest I've sent in a response. Busy weekend coming up. On a side note, thanks for the comments before reading my review last week. It made me all warm and fuzzy and loved. I truly appreciate it. Well, we do love you, Kelly, because you emailed us. This is awesome.
I know. You sent us feedback. This is great.
Yeah. To continue. Also, I try to read through my comments before sending because I'm dyslexic, so in advance, sorry if it sometimes seems jumbled and I'm missing words. Brain works faster than the fingers. Laugh out loud. This week's thoughts. Confidence, the word, not just for Jackson, but for Palmer, Rip, and Kendra. Heatwave and Captain Cold have it in abundance. It oozes out of kick-ass Sara.
Yes,
Good point there, yes. You can definitely see who has it and who doesn't. Her next point, what's the significance of 4587, which was the code that they had to use to get into the smoke building access?
Oh, that's right.
So she says, is that Felicity's birthday?
I don't know.
Good point. I actually didn't even think of that when he pulled out the code. Who knows what that is? So that would be 4587. I guess the year would be 87?
Yeah, April 5th, 87,
Okay.
1987.
Yeah. Interesting. I wonder if that will come back.
Wow.
Her next point, for a non-comic book background, I geek out over some of the craziest things. Deathstroke and Not Joe that he talked about on the island. Connor Hawke is John Diggle's son. I called that. And the street names that were used. Then she goes on, so it seemed that Quentin had just died recently, not in 2016, 30 years prior. So does that mean he's not the one in the grave? Fingers crossed. So she's talking about Arrow there, because there's still the mystery on Arrow as to who's in the grave.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking Diggle's also not in the grave, since Lila isn't pregnant in Arrow. So she's basically calling out that it can't be Diggle and it can't be Quentin Lance that are in the grave. Interesting.
Yeah, I still keep going back to it's a possible
future. So yeah, will this relate back to Arrow? Anyway, she goes on. Felicity was still part of the team until recently. ? Seems like it because older Oliver did say Felicity left when everything started happening. So that does seem a lot more recent.
Yeah, I would assume until the uprising started, because he did say she left after everything started. So to me, that's the uprising, which was 15 years prior.
Right. So not 30 years ago, but 15 years ago, roughly.
Right.
Possibly. And then the last point was, Captain Cold, I think we have a problem. It's getting too hot in the spaceship. Cool down that partner of yours before it's too late.
Seriously.
See you in the funny pages, Kelly, a.k.a. Masters Wordsmith. Yeah, I think that's going to be something that's going to definitely be brought up a few times, if not right away in the next episode. There is now a bit of friction between the two of them.
Yeah, I think so too.
All right, so our next feedback. Take it away, Harley.
So we have a voicemail from Jeremy in Australia.
And we'll play it right now for you.
Hi, this is Jeremy from Melbourne, Australia, with my thoughts on episode 6. I'll keep my feedback brief on this episode. In my opinion, all that matters in this episode is that our team gets to fight with future Oliver. Important details are the following. He's a bit old, he's a bit grumpy, he's missing one arm, and he has a goatee, and I can't wait for next episode. In case you didn't get it, this wasn't my favourite, but they can't all be fantastic. I rate this episode 6 full-length fur coats out of 10. I can't wait to hear the next episode of your podcast to find out how much you and others like this show, even though I didn't this time round. This is Jeremy from Melbourne, Australia.
Well, thanks, Jeremy, again, for your voice feedback.
Yeah, that was great. It's always nice to hear a fun accent.
Yeah, you told him, keep calling in because you love his accent. So.
I did, yeah. So, yes, keep calling.
So he wasn't entirely pleased with this episode from what it sounds like.
Yeah.
He's only giving it a 6 out of 10, essentially, but I think he was quite pleased with the older Oliver and stuff. That was his favorite part.
I think that was everybody's favorite part. That was pretty awesome. Although I did like the episode overall, but I can understand because I can see how some people would consider it a filler episode.
Yeah, I mean, and to answer my side on that too, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more than you, Jeremy. We keep forgetting to give ratings. I know all the other podcasts do ratings. I don't know if we want to or should, but I think I enjoyed it a little bit more. I would maybe put it at the 7.5 to 8 mark just because it's a future thing. I love future stuff. I liked what happened with Captain Cold and Heatwave, that there's going to be some friction there, and I love the Green Arrow stuff with Sara and Oliver. Really, the only part of the episode I didn't like was the love triangle stuff they were trying to do. So 75% of the episode I liked, and the rest, and a little bit no. So yeah, I think I enjoyed it for the most part.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah. And now, moving on, we have an email from someone we haven't heard from yet, but we do know, Mr. Demko Listener. We know Demko Listener from Aero Squad. He's actually the introduction voice you hear on Aero Squad.
Oh, I was wondering who that was.
Yeah, that is
I
him.
did not know that. Okay. Well, good to know.
It would be cool if we got a voice email from him in that voice. That would be pretty cool.
He might have to keep it short, but that would be awesome.
So, here is his email, and since it is my destiny to read this week, here we go. Dear Flash and Harley, whom I am now dubbing Quick and Quinn as a combined duo.
I like it.
Uh-oh. Quick. So, does that mean we're going to lose our Wonder Twins moniker, or it'd be Quick and Quinn?
I don't know. I think we're a little bit of everything at this point.
Bit of everything. You know what? Everybody's allowed to have their pet names for us. How's that?
Absolutely. Keep them
up.
coming.
So he says, I didn't have much hope for the show after the first and second episodes because no one felt like they belonged. This week's episode made me do a complete 180 on my viewpoint. I'm absolutely loving the relationships they're forming and even breaking on the show. I was a bit worried when they started up romantic discussions this week with a potential love triangle with Kendra, Ray, and Jax, but I loved how the episode ended with all of them slightly better friends and having an understanding about how love really doesn't have a place on the show, at least not for now. I don't think I'll have an issue if they revisit this later on, but now felt like the wrong time.
I agree.
Yeah,
with all of it.
Yep, I'm exactly with you there. Leonard and Rory, I admire the way the writers are handling these two. I can tell that Snart is slowly becoming a hero, and as a contrast, Rory refuses to change, setting up some friction between the two longtime friends. I really enjoyed how Rory vented to Ray at the end of the episode, building on the friendship that seemed to have formed last week. That's right, I forgot that he kind of vented to Ray a little bit there.
I did, yeah. That was kind of almost a throwaway little thing, but yeah, he did.
But yeah, bringing it back, I might actually have to rewatch that to catch that little bit again. Good
yeah.
point. Overall, I think these writers understand that this show isn't really about time travel. The ridiculous paradoxical nature of the time travel element is very hand-wavy, but I don't focus or nitpick about it.
You're not wrong.
This show is more about people who are a little off, finding a home with one another, and the relationships on this show seem to bear that out. They feel like more of a family now. I especially love the rest of the team rushing to Sara's aid under Rip's direction. It almost made me a bit glassy-eyed. Sorry for the longish feedback, but thanks for putting this show together. You know what, Demko? Don't ever worry about the length of your feedback. I don't care if it's 5 pages long. We're going to love it, and we're going to read it. And until we start getting tons and tons of it back, we will read it from start to finish.
But if you send a 5-page email, just to be clear, Martin is volunteering to read 5-page emails.
I guess
I did not volunteer.
But either way, thanks so much for coming on board and sending us something. We much appreciate it. It's very cool because I haven't actually heard you for a while on Aero Squad. I haven't heard any feedback. So the fact that you sent us some is very, very cool.
Oh yeah, that's totally awesome.
Yeah. And you know what? He brought up a couple points that I didn't think of. Again, at the very end, something we didn't talk about, how the team did eventually rush to Sara's aid and help her in that last fight.
They did.
I love that. They decided as a group they were not going to leave her behind, and they went and got her, and it was a good fight sequence at the end.
Yeah, and it all started with that quote that I liked from Martin Stein about how he had to talk Rip basically into not leaving her, and then the entire team kind of rushed to her aid. So I liked that a lot.
Yeah.
It's good.
Well, thanks. And guess what? We got another voicemail.
I know. We've gotten 3 voicemails. We had the one from Kevin, and then Jeremy, and now we have a voicemail from the green butterfly herself.
And here it is.
Flash, Harley, how are you? This is your eye-in-the-sky green butterfly. I go to Star City, Central City, National City. Now I followed the Rave Rider through a time warp to meet you here in 2046. I give that episode 10 out of 10 futures in flux.
Wow.
It had a little bit of everything. Action, character development, a spectacular performance from Stephen Amell. I'm not gonna lie, I kind of teared up when I saw the Arrow Cave like that. And I love that the musical director put in the Arrow music when they entered the Arrow Cave.
Me too.
I think Sara was right to confront Rip, saying, you want us to change the future for your family, but you don't want to help me save my city? So I'm glad that in the end, he sent the team to help her. Because even though this is only a possible future, it would be impossible for Sara not to be emotionally connected to the possibility of her city looking like this. I thought it was interesting during the episode that they kept using camera angles that would show store windows saying everything must go, like the going out of business sale signs, as a symbol that basically everyone is gone and only the criminals are left. Snart continues to amaze me. We meet him as a bad guy, Captain Cold. But really, he's not all that cold. We've learned through the Flash that he loves his sister. He's helped Barry a few times in Central City when he didn't really have to. Sure, he's mostly out for personal gain, but I really do think that we're starting to see his journey between villain and hero. I don't know what we're going to do with Rory. He seems like a loose cannon, a live wire.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any component of the team I'm worried about gelling properly, it's going to be Heatwave. So I know you record on Superhero Fridays, so happy Superhero Friday to you guys. And you guys have always been heroes. And now, with this podcast, you are legends. Tomorrow's legends. I love it. Have a super week.
Aw, Green Butterfly, I think we are both so completely happy that you fluttered your little wings onto the Wave Rider with us to take this journey with us. That was so cool to hear.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you so much for sending that in. And she had a lot of really good points.
What's so amazing about her is she's so observant.
Always.
She always picks things out of the episode that most of us, it goes right by us. And she just has this laser focus eyesight and just picks things out and it brings up these amazing points. So like that thing she said about the windows, all the advertising the windows saying final sale, everything must go. I did not even notice that.
I did notice the one everything must go sign, but it was huge, and I think it was directly behind someone during one of the shots.
Oh,
and
okay.
I did, it was interesting. I forgot to write it down, but yeah, I'm glad she brought that up because that was a really cool thing that they did.
I agreed with her on everything she said, Oliver's performance, or Stephen Amell's performance, and yeah, there was definitely a lot of, and after listening to her going on about it, she gave it a 10 out of 10, and I can kind of see why after listening to her words and stuff. It was pretty darn good episode.
Like I said, I was captivated by it. Kind of from the beginning, I was all in. I needed to know what happened next. I couldn't, get through it fast enough. So.
Yeah. But again, thank you, Green Butterfly, for your extremely touching and kind words, especially at the end there. It really touches our hearts. It means a lot.
Yes, thank you.
So we've got one last email. I'm just going to pull it up here. And it is from Destiny Dazzler, who I've enjoyed her messages when she calls into the Arrow Squad. Oh my God, she brings tears to my eyes sometimes with some of the things she says.
Yeah, she has some great feedback.
So she sent us a short email, and I will read it for us right now. I was just wondering if you guys were as surprised as I was that Connor Hawke was Diggle's son. And if you think, yeah.
Sorry. Yes, I was.
And if you think Diggle and Lila will have a son in our timeline, or if that was just for Legends of Tomorrow. You guys are awesome. Keep doing what you're doing. From Destiny Dazzler. Well, first off, thanks for contacting us and getting on to Legends with us. Yeah, to just answer it, I believe she's just asking us direct question, you and me, if we were surprised. And I was, even though people speculated about it, I still was surprised just because I wasn't sure, because on Arrow we don't have a Diggle son yet, we only have a Diggle daughter.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I was a little bit surprised by that as well. I was not expecting that. I was expecting him to be, I don't know, just some like random person, maybe an impersonator, not a real Green Arrow, but then, then we find out who he is. So I was very surprised.
Yeah, exactly. And then the second part of her question is, if they will have a son in our timeline, and I think she's referring to the Arrow timeline.
Right.
That's a good question. It keeps coming back. All of these possibilities keep coming back to this story being a possible future. So whether Arrow is going to pull from that at all as possibilities for their own storylines, hard to say. I mean, obviously it is going to have to happen quite a few years later, because I don't think Connor Hawke was very old. He looked 18 to me. He
looked pretty young, early 20s at the most.
So 18 to 25 at the most. And so even then, this was 2046. Even at the max, if he was 25, that would have still put him at 2021 when he would have been born, which is still 5 years from now. So, which actually would make sense. I mean, Diggle and Lila have a daughter who's pretty much still a baby, so maybe in 5 years they have one more kid, and I guess that would all work out. So to finalize answering your question, Destiny Dazzler, is that I guess Arrow has to last at least another 4 or 5 seasons for us to see if that's going to come true.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think anything they've introduced here is a possibility, but because of the time frames, I think it's a remote possibility. So we'll just have to see what they do with it.
But again, thank you, Destiny Dazzler, for getting in touch with us. Nice to hear from you.
Absolutely.
And that is it for our feedback for this week, Harley.
It is. I think that's also a wrap for our show this week.
I think so. That was a good one. Good episode, good discussion, and good feedback. It was all around. I think I'm going to give us almost a 10 out of 10 for tonight.
Yeah, it was we had a lot going on, and it was good. I think we've probably run a little bit long, but that's okay. We had, some things we needed to knock out in the beginning, especially in the early stages. It's good to make sure we acknowledge the listeners and the iTunes reviews and the fun feedback. It's just so exciting. So you have to forgive us for going a little long.
Yes, and I just hope you guys understand out there that we are excited, and you're warming our hearts and making us feel so good that you are responding. So we want to just kind of pay that back to you by mentioning it on air and talking about it and saying thank you openly and publicly to everybody. So, yeah. Give
you a shout out. Everybody loves to be heard on the air. That's exactly. The whole reason we're doing this to begin with, is because we heard ourselves. So. Right.
And just to remind you, like, if you guys are giving us your superhero names and you'd rather be called by them, then for sure sign off with that in your emails or your voicemails. And if you don't mind your names being used, and that's what you give us, then yeah. So just make sure we let us know. Yep. And on that note, Harley, let's just remind everybody how they can get in touch with us.
You can follow us on Twitter at Cybercast. You can find us on Facebook. We have a Facebook group. If you just search for Tomorrow's Legends, just send us a request and we'll get you approved. Mm-hmm. And you can email us at cybercastfan@gmail.com and send us all your lovely thoughts, just like Kelly and Jeremy and Demko and Green Butterfly and Destiny Dazzler and Podcast Overlord. We had a lot of feedback.
We did. I'm so proud right now. I'm just feeling so proud.
I know. It's so exciting. And finally, you can head on over to iTunes and give us a 5-star review.
Right. And then also, if people are going to the Libsyn website where our webpage is, they can also download and listen from there. And there is feedback form embedded right within each episode, so they could do that as well.
Yep. You could add some comments. I think that covers it. Or do we have any other ways to get in touch with us? That's a lot of ways.
That is quite a few. And that is it for us tonight, Harley. We've got another week till our next episode.
I know. Well, at least it's only another week and not another month.
Exactly. So come on to us, guys. Everybody. We want to bring you all on board. All of the squad members, all of the undergrounders. Let's hear it.
Bring it.
That sounds like a challenge.
Come join us.
Come join us, please.
That sounds better.
Well, Harley, this was fun. Until next week, this is The Flash signing off.
And this is Harley Quinn. I'm out.